Okay. I'm going to go next. We're going to go to the board here and flip over. Talk about one of the things from a managerial perspective, to me, was the most impressive thing of the weekend. Before I start, turning into Danny DeVito. It wasn't Danny DeVito. Who's in the Always Sunny meme? It's the guy from Pacific Rim.
Charlie Day. Charlie
Yeah,
Day.
Charlie Day. Yeah, that guy. I'll do
Yeah.
that on the board here in a
The
second. And
guy
then
from
start.
Pacific Rim.
I love those movies, man. The second one didn't happen. What did you guys see from the way that Charleston really, in a way, dominated this Pittsburgh team in a fashion that we just didn't see for the last 2 months of last year? No?
I think to
Okay.
start, I want to start on the Pittsburgh side of things because I think we're going to spend most of the time on the board here keying in on what Charleston did tactically. I feel like there's no tactical anything here. I feel like this is a Pittsburgh team that we did not see last year, and though it's many of the similar players, they're trying to refine an identity. Um, in theory, that midfield four right there of Bassett, Griffin, Sample, all is better than the one they had last year. Deke was a better striker than the one they had last year. The coach is the same and has had a whole offseason to enact ideas. I didn't see a Pittsburgh Riverhounds team that was as eager to do things on the ball as I was expecting them to, and a lot of that is because of Charleston. But I want to plant the flag early that this Pittsburgh team's going to be fine. But I also want to specify, preface all those things that I don't think we got the best out of Pittsburgh in this match, even on their own accord. So it has a lot to do with Charleston, but a big part of this match was Pittsburgh just didn't do anything themselves for the first 45 minutes to earn much from this match.
Should be said, to the injury point from earlier, another team that was missing one of their key players with no Robbie
Sure.
Ertz, who tempos their press and gives them the fluidity of structure and his movement in attack. And for all intents and purposes, now that Schuber's playing for the other guys in this game and Eric Dick is playing for Indy, is probably the most important player in this team. So that should be said. But, John, what did you see from this one?
Yeah, and on the Charleston side, just the fluidity that they had across the midfield, I think really impressed me. Yes, you would expect Suber to be kind of in that central pocket and Ikaza the same. The attacking midfielders were in that vertical band. But within those zones, I guess you could label it, there was so much freedom to move around. Messer and Casiero and Kelly felt like they could pop up in any of those positions at any time. Wilmer Cabrera taking up this really probing role in the right half space. You combine it together, and it confuses Pittsburgh on the one hand, but it never undercut Charleston's counterpress. Every time the ball turned over, they swarmed. They
Yeah.
understood their responsibility. I think Suber was huge in that calculus, like looked like a natural number six in that phase of play. Everything you want a Ben Pierman team to be, Charleston was in week one.
I maybe buried the lead here because the primary observation to take from this is that Sean Suber can play six in a way that I don't think any of us really anticipated he was capable of. Is that ever going to be the best use of him and his talents? No, of course not. But on this particular game, I thought it was a great choice because not only is it solving for the problem that you don't have Hosu Landry in this game and you need somebody to play six, but on top of that, you've got a guy who's going to break up the action in the pockets that Pittsburgh are so dependent on in the attack. But the thing that I thought added the most value, and this is what I wanted to show you guys today, is what it did in regard to altering the press that was so important for Pittsburgh a year ago. You see this line of three in the back three, with Souza now in the middle as the communicator, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But the way that this changed the kind of shape that Pittsburgh were able to press with. So the big thing that stood out to me is whenever the ball would go to center back, Deke would trigger, lead that press forward, and then you've got this action where Griffin is trying to cover one guy, All is trying to cover the other, prevent access to the pivot. And typically what we've seen here is Bassett and Sample will step up and create this kill zone that exists in this area kind of here, right? You're trying to maybe tempt them to play into that space so that you can pick off balls and create those second ball opportunities that the likes of Bradley Sample and Danny Griffin are so good at winning and giving them the opportunities in the break. So how was Ben Pierman going to break that up and change some of the calculus in the middle of the field? So what we saw a lot of the time, especially in that first phase of build-up, is Suber, who is not going to be much of a factor, you don't want him on the ball early, would kind of go away up in here. That does a couple things. It forces a decision out of whichever midfielder is marking him. Do you follow and drop off, which we saw a lot in this game, and I think that was crucial. But on top of that, that gives you the ability to just play the ball into him to knock it down. Kelly maybe comes in. You've got Barry, who's mobile, who can come in and pick up those second balls, and you put the threat that we saw Kevin Lambert so often do last year for Louisville into this game. Beyond that, sometimes Subaru would just drift over here and kind of get out of the way, which would allow Kelly to come infield and kind of get into these spaces and cause mathematical problems for the center backs. So there's multiplicity there. But the big thing that I saw, John, is how freely Laurent Cassiadou, out of the 10, was able to drop a line on this vertical access and make this very difficult for these holding midfielders to figure out what to do. Because you have the option of following, but again, that presents this opportunity for Kelly to come in field and be a vertical target off a knockdown to Barry, and then you've got a 2-on-3, and all that has to happen from that point is somebody slips, falls down, and you're in if you're Charleston. So that's tough. And then on top of that, you've got Cassiadou oftentimes just able to, for the most part, drop this line uncontested, pick up the ball, and then Charleston start to build that way and make their triangles up the field. I felt like the deployment of Cassiadou is what broke the rules of this press, and I thought everything Ben Pierman did in terms of pressing the buttons, choosing Messer as the left back in this game so that they keep the width and prevent guys like Barnes and Etu from coming infield and adding the number in the coverage. I thought they did everything that took away the fangs of the press for Pittsburgh, in the long-winded way of saying, with what Cassiadou was doing.
To speak on Cassiadou briefly, 14 touches in the defensive half in this game, which is way more than you would expect from a Charleston 10. Not only was that additive breaking the press, but it also figured into what I was mentioning with the counter press. And I don't even know if it showed up statistically, but the number of times where there was a turnover and Cassiadou was the first player in the Pittsburgh ball handler's face was noticeable to my eye. That's why you bring him into this team, and I think it's why Ben Pierman made him a pretty key addition for this club. But yeah, really important to the balance there.
John, you were on it early too with Pierman's love of playing Cassiadou as this sort of central roamer that can pickpocket and do these things. And then you add in the idea that Kelly can be this creative engine. You spoke to how Messer was the highest player up the pitch on the left side throughout that friendly against Jacksonville right before the season started. And you look at the way this Charleston roster is constructed, and while not as talented, I think, as last year's is, it's unbelievably cohesive. You got a chance to see that right away from minute number 1. They bossed the game for 25, 30 minutes, the opening start. It didn't look like Pittsburgh was going to have the chance to get a breath in. And that's a really encouraging thing. Charleston, for me, we knew Louisville would be good. Lexington proved a lot of things. Sacramento and Tulsa showed you that they're still going to be the same old kind of dominant teams with a couple of nice little nuances in there this season and a couple of better players in different spots. Charleston was are they going to have any solution for the way Pittsburgh has historically played or the way Pittsburgh played at the back end of last year? Or are they going to be absolutely dominant? And I was a little surprised to see it be the latter in just the way that they went. And now if Sean Suber is going to play as a 6 or have the ability to be played as a 6, you can use that in a matchup specific way. Maybe Landry's a better player in certain games there. Suber will be a better center back for this team every single time. But when you have 3 center backs with the ability of Suber, Smith, and Apononu, you have the ability to show some luxury with Sean Suber and say, hey, go pick out pockets. Peyton, if you take Sean Suber and just dump him up into like the right half space in zone 14, you don't have to move everybody else, but keep him highlighted. No, right side, his right side. Yep, there you go. You got it. So like somewhere in there, he would pick up those kinds of spaces constantly in this match, it felt like, when Casiadu would drop in, when Ikaza would drop in, especially as Charleston progressed further up the pitch. Suber was not the rest defender that you'd think he'd be if he was in as the six. He was sometimes, but there were moments where Sean Suber would be on the edge of the 18-yard box,
Mm-hmm.
looking to play a pass in, looking to find that extra moment, looking to connect with a first-time ball. They have just a ton of versatility within all this talent, and I think that's a pleasure to see with Ben Pierman's group.
Well, and this is how you break the press, right? These cyclical rotations where if you're going to mark us man for man, we're going to do some weird stuff, and some players are going to be in some places you wouldn't expect them to be, specifically for the object of manipulating the defensive shape and disorganizing, right? And I think often throughout the game, I was kind of shocked. I was thinking to myself, it's like, where's Emilio Icaza in the first phase of build-up? Why is he not touching the ball? And I think that was very intentional in the sense that he was kind of decoying away from the action so that they could change the math in that first phase of play and make it so Pittsburgh, in a way that just was not true for any of the prior, I guess, what was it, 6 games that Rob Vincent was totally in charge of. Pittsburgh always felt like they were slowly vicing an opponent into playing the way that Pittsburgh wanted them to. And Pittsburgh, in this game, I'm going to use another football analogy. The reason why Kyle Shanahan is so good as an offensive mind is because he comes at it from the perspective of being in the defensive coordinator's mind and being like, okay, what are the rules of this defense? Once I understand those, I can break those rules and I can deceive them. And that is what it felt like Ben Pierman did in this game. And in a way that I think he will have to more game in and game out this year because he doesn't have the individual difference makers that he had a year ago.
John, I guess in another, feather in Pierman's cap here, look at the new additions, then how they perform. Suber gets the goal, plays out of position, plays very well. Casiadu plays as a 10, which isn't his traditional role, gets 14 touches in his own half, like you point out, plays in an atypical way that you'd think he would play. Nathan Messer has 7 crosses, gets an assist in. Miguel Berry doesn't do anything on the score sheet tangibly, but looked really fluid, connective, was able to drop in, had a ton of aura, which is a thing that I'm counting for as well. All these guys that got the start today of the new additions looked like they belonged right away, and that was a lot of fun to see.